Okay, we're going to sing happy birthday. All right, Grandma, start leading us in happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Cha cha cha.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Grandpa. Happy birthday to you.
Cha cha cha.
He's wearing his pampered chef apron. I don't know whether it's the grandpa. If he's the pampered one.
I'm pampered today.
The pampered chef.
So how old am I?
73.
73.
What year was Grandpa born?
1939.
Wow. Smart people up there.
All right, what do you want us to do?
So I'd like you first to tell us another family history story.
Okay.
Given it's your birthday, you can do the typical about your birth or whatever you'd like to do, but maybe a personal story about your history today.
Okay.
And then we'll have Virginia share something too.
Jack.
Okay. My mother always sent me a birthday card, and she would say that I was born on a cold, snowy November day. That's how she'd always start it. So, in those days we were born, I was not born in the hospital, I was born at home. So the doctor would come to the people's homes and deliver babies. So 73 years ago, in an old log home, when it snows on the ground, why that's when the doctor came out and helped my mother give birth to me.
Will you be doing?
I have no idea if I was big, small, green or yellow or what. All right, so here's my story for tonight. Some of you have already heard this story before. When I was in high school, I was in all the school plays. In fact, I was voted best thespian 2 years in a row. A real honor. So
What's a thespian they're talking
So I obviously wasn't an athlete. I was a thespian. That's an actor. So there's this one school play when I was a junior in high school. Why, we of course had to dress up in these different costumes or uniforms, and so I drove our old 1949 Chevrolet car up to the high school, parked it, and went in and got dressed, in the dress I was playing the part in the play. And what I did, for whatever reason, I put the car keys, I changed the car keys and put them in the costume, the pant pockets of the costume I was wearing. After it was the last night, we put that play on for 3 nights, and then it was that last evening, why, we had a party at one of the members of the play, the cast party, and so I just left my car there at the high school, and I went down to one of the cast members' homes where we had a party. As I remember, why we had, root beer and ice cream and some cookies and things like that, and played a few games. So when the other member of the cast brought me back up to the high school parking lot, it was well after midnight, and my car. Our car was the only one in the parking lot. And I jumped out of his car, and he drove off, and I reached in my pad pockets only to find out I had no car keys. And so I thought, oh, now and no one's lights were on in the neighborhood around, and I didn't want to bother anyone anyway, and of course didn't have cell phones in those days, so you couldn't call home, and in those days those old cars had a button you pushed. You had to turn on the key, and then you had a button on the dashboard that you pushed in order to start the car. You didn't turn the key on and start at the same time like our cars today. So I sit there in the car, and I put the car in neutral, and I prayed. I said, ask Heavenly Father to bring about a miracle, that the car would start without the keys. And so, after I finished my prayer, well, then I pushed in on the clutch, and I pushed on that button, and it just turned over. It turns over without the key on. Why it won't start the engine. So then nothing happened. So I thought, well, I haven't prayed hard enough. And so again, I bowed my head and I prayed with all my heart that the car would start so I could go home. And again, I pushed the button. Nothing happened. The car wouldn't start. And so I prayed one more time. And as I was praying, I remembered that a friend of mine had told me how he could hotwire a car, so you wouldn't have to have keys to start it. In order to hotwire the car, you took a penny and you put it in where the key went in, where the wiring was, and that's where you crossed the wires with a penny, copper penny, and a car would start up. Well, I had never done that before in my life, and it was pitch dark, and I reached my pocket, and I took out the only penny I had in my pocket, and I reached up under the dashboard. Now, of course, today you can't do that, but back in those days, you reach up under the dashboard where all the wiring was, and I was trying to feel to see where I could put that penny, and the penny fell out of my hand. It dropped. And I couldn't find it, and couldn't retrieve it. So now I didn't know what to do. So again, I bowed my head and I prayed. And then I pushed on that button, and the car started right up. And so I pushed in on the clutch, put the car in gear, and drove home. And I was just a little ways from our home when I hit a bump in the road, and the engine of the car stopped. So I pushed in on the clutch real quick, and coasted. And I coasted just right into our driveway, and got home. So then the next day, when it was light and I could lay down on the floor of the car and kind of look up underneath there, well, I could see where the penny was. And so that penny happened to just drop in a perfect place so that it made the connection. And when I hit that bump, just as I got home, that penny, it jarred the penny loose, and the car engine died, but I was able to just coast right at home. So that's how Heavenly Father answered that prayer for me. Okay, it's Grandma's turn.
It's a pretty hard story to follow. I'll tell you a story about a vehicle too. My dad was a bush pilot, but before that, we had lived on a little farm way up, about an hour's drive out of Burns Lake, and my dad and my grandpa had a little sawmill, and they would cut lumber. and then they would saw it into boards and then put it on my dad's truck. And then they would load it up, and I used to love to go to town with my dad to unload the lumber, because underneath the load of lumber on the deck of the truck there would be kind of a roller, like a rolling pin, kind of a big long metal rolling pin at the end of the truck. And so when my dad was going to unload the lumber, he would undo the chains around the truck in the lumber yard, and then he would back up really fast and slam on the brake, and that would jerk the load backwards. The load would gradually slide backwards on that roller, and then pretty soon it would get just about to bounce off the back of the truck. And then the last time when the load went off, the front end of the truck would come up like this, like it was riding on a horse, and you'd feel like you were riding on a horse that was rearing up, and the lumber would fall off. And sometimes it would kind of stay in a organized piece, otherwise it would all fall to bits. And so I used to love to ride with my dad to go and when he hauled the lumber. And my grandpa used to be a mailman. And my dad's dad was the mailman for 36 years on the south side of Francis Lake. For those of you who have been to Francis Lake, you go across the ferry, and my grandpa used to haul the lumber, or haul the mail. He'd come across to the north side and pick up the mail sacks and take them across, and then in the horse and team, and then finally he got a car, or I think it was an old Model A. He was one of the first people to have a car in that country, and to deliver the mail. And he did that for 36 years. And the people used to say that if my grandpa could come across the ice to get the mail, then you could still go across. But my grandpa would always be the very last person to ever cross the ice in the spring, and the first one to cross the ice in the fall, because the ferry couldn't work when the lake froze over in the fall. So there was always lots of transportation stuff going on in my family. And then when my dad, what he really wanted to do was to be a bush pilot, well, to fly airplanes. So when I was 10 years old, he got his commercial pilot. He already had a private pilot license before I was born, but when I was 10, he got his commercial license. And then we moved away from the farm into town. And then my dad used to fly geologists and fishermen and hunters and all those kind of things into remote areas. And he would fly prospectors and fly supplies into the mines and that kind of thing. And that's what he did. That's my story for today.
Okay.